Tara Lynn Grant came into the world on June 22, 1972, in Michigan. She spent the majority of her childhood living on a farm with her parents and her sister. Tara enjoyed being outside, riding horses, and assisting her parents with other animals on the farm. During school, Tara took part in many sports. She was a member of both the cheerleading and basketball teams, and she also played in the school band. After finishing high school, Tara went on to attend the University of Michigan, where she met a man named Stephen. They began a relationship and got married not long after she graduated. Tara, who had earned a business degree, secured employment with a large international company. Stephen, on the other hand, intended to pursue a career in politics. While he had been an assistant to a state senator during his time in university, once the senator retired, Stephen found himself without a position. As a result, he began working at a small tool-making business that belonged to his father. For years following their marriage, the couple welcomed a daughter, and a few years later, a son. After the birth of their second child, the family purchased a new home in a wealthy neighborhood in Macomb County, Michigan, located just outside Detroit. By that time, Tara had advanced considerably in her career, though it came with its disadvantages. Her work required frequent travel, often flying to other states and countries, which meant she was only able to spend weekends at home with her family. Because of this, Stephen took on the majority of the childcare duties. His role at his father's company provided him with a flexible schedule, which allowed him to devote more time to the children. Nevertheless, it remained difficult for him to balance both work and childcare, so they made the decision to hire a full-time nanny. There is a particular program that assists families in finding a nanny from abroad who would live with them full-time and handle the childcare. With her career providing the financial means, Tara was able to employ such a nanny, and they soon located the right candidate. They hired a young woman from Germany, who quickly bonded with their children and assumed most of the childcare responsibilities. Stephen, having gained more free time, also began working part-time as a youth soccer coach. However, despite the family's stable financial condition, Tara's constant absence put strain on her marriage with Stephen. Since she was home only on weekends, arguments between them became increasingly frequent. Tara hoped that after earning her next promotion, she would be able to adjust her schedule so she could spend more time at home. Until then, however, she remained away on work trips nearly every day. This continued until February 14, 2007, when something unforeseen occurred. On Valentine's Day, Stephen contacted the police and reported that Tara had been out of contact for 5 days, which was highly unusual. He explained that on the evening of February 9th, Tara had come home from a business trip and informed him that she needed to leave a day earlier on this occasion, staying only a single day with the family. This resulted in yet another argument between them, and Tara began packing her suitcase. A few minutes later, Stephen overheard her speaking on the phone, saying, "I'll be waiting at the end of the street," before she left the house and got into a dark-colored car. From that moment, Tara had not contacted anyone and ignored all of his calls. The police's first question was why Stephen had waited 5 days before reporting her missing. But Stephen explained that at first, he didn't think there was any reason to worry. He believed Tara had simply gone on her business trip earlier than expected and wasn't answering his calls because of the argument they had. Yet, as the days went by, he began to grow concerned since she had not reached out for such a long time. Usually, when she was away, she would call their children, who were only 3 and 7 years old, but this time she didn't. On Monday, Tara's boss phoned him and said she had failed to show up for a meeting. This was very unusual and indicated she had not gone to work. Stephen called her family members and told them what was happening, but they assumed Tara just wanted some time away from the constant fighting with him. She had told her parents several times that her relationship with Stephen was becoming increasingly strained because of her job, and they argued quite often. So, her relatives believed she had taken a break from Stephen and would soon come back home. As more time passed, Tara still did not appear, and she did not answer any calls. Eventually, Stephen became worried that something might have happened to her and chose to reach out to the police. While Stephen was responding to the police's questions, they noticed several suspicious scratches on him. Detectives asked if his quarrel with his wife had turned physical, but Stephen denied it. He claimed that since he regularly worked with metal parts at his father's workshop, he often got scratched by them. After the station interview, detectives said they would need to search the house, and Stephen agreed. When they arrived, they saw that all of Tara's possessions, including her documents and purse, were missing, along with her suitcase. Stephen also provided them access to Tara's computer, where they checked her bank account. There had been no transactions since the day she vanished, which seemed strange. If she had really traveled somewhere, she would have needed to purchase plane tickets, book hotels, and so forth. But there had been no activity on her account during those 5 days. While searching the house, detectives failed to find any evidence that might explain Tara's disappearance. There was no sign she had become the victim of a crime, so investigators were left attempting to trace her movements since February 9th. The local police department had little expertise in handling such cases since the area was regarded as one of the safest in the nation. Most of the time, they dealt with minor disputes between neighbors and other nonviolent issues. They asked Stephen to take a polygraph test, but he became furious at the idea that the police suspected him of being involved. He insisted he would never harm his wife and began to cry. The police left his house and started thinking about their next steps. But the very next morning, Stephen unexpectedly called them and said he was ready for questioning. However, just moments later, his lawyer reached out to detectives and said he had advised his client not to go through with it. Naturally, the police saw Stephen as the main person of interest, as he was Tara's husband. Not only was this common procedure in such cases, but they also had no other promising leads. Tara's friends, colleagues, and family members all confirmed they had not heard from her since February 9th and had no idea where she could be. There had been no movements on her bank account either, even though she would have certainly needed to spend money. Detectives began to think about ways to question Stephen and quickly came across something noteworthy. His driver's license had been revoked, but he still continued to drive his car. So, officers waited until he got behind the wheel and arrested him. Yet again, he felt like the police were treating him as a suspect and refused to speak with them. His lawyer promptly bailed him out, and Stephen went home. The police pressed on with their search for evidence, and requested Tara's mobile phone records. Her last call was made on the day she disappeared. She had called Stephen from the airport, and told him she would be home soon. After that, Stephen made numerous attempts to reach her, but all of them went to voicemail. Detectives listened to those recordings. In them, Stephen repeatedly begged her to answer or call him back, accused her of neglecting their children, and pleaded with her to return for their sake. The phone had been turned off, and according to data from the carrier, the final time it connected to cell towers was near Tara's home on the evening she vanished. Interestingly, the police found no incoming calls during that time frame. And as we remember, Stephen had claimed that someone phoned Tara before she left the house and she said she would be waiting at the street. But despite this, from Stephen's voicemail recordings, detectives felt he was genuinely worried about his wife and angry with her for leaving the kids. They did not hurry to eliminate him as a suspect, but they had no other new leads either. Stephen still refused to cooperate with the police, accusing them of wasting their time on him instead of finding Tara. Instead, he engaged heavily with the media, which had been covering the case since the early days. Tara's unexplained disappearance quickly drew national attention, and Stephen appeared in front of cameras nearly every day, pleading for her to come home. When the company that provided the nanny to Stephen and Tara learned about the case, they decided to send her back to Germany. Before she left, she gave a statement to police and described her time in their household positively. She also mentioned that on the evening Tara came home, she herself was out at a bar with friends. When she returned, she saw Stephen, who looked upset, and he told her Tara had just left the house. Despite Stephen's refusal to work with the police, he hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent, who carried out his own inquiry but also failed to locate Tara. Since there were no useful leads, police tried a different tactic. They contacted the same agency that had arranged for the nanny, and there they discovered something noteworthy. Before hiring the German woman, the family had already gone through 6 nannies, but none of them had stayed for long. Detectives spoke to those former nannies, and nearly all of them said Stephen's behavior was not only strange but also frightening. They said he searched through their things, asked personal questions, and frequently yelled at them, acting as though they were obligated to follow his commands. The police then began to wonder why the last nanny from Germany described her time with the family so differently, using only positive words for Stephen. They obtained permission to monitor her emails and phone calls, which led to an unexpected discovery. Detectives found messages between her and Stephen, revealing that the two had been in a secret affair. It turned out the 19-year-old was involved in an intimate relationship with him during Tara's work trips, and it had lasted until she was forced to leave the country. While this provided an important lead, the affair by itself did not prove Stephen had anything to do with Tara's disappearance, so investigators kept searching for more evidence. When they spoke to Tara's friends and family, detectives found that almost all of them had disliked Stephen since the very beginning of the marriage. They said he acted oddly, tried to control her every move, and got along with none of her family members. Investigators also learned something else soon afterward. Stephen's former girlfriend, who had dated him before Tara, reached out to police with interesting information. She said Stephen had contacted her several months earlier, and their conversations gradually became more intimate. Eventually, Stephen openly expressed a desire to have a romantic relationship with her, even though both of them were married. He also complained constantly about Tara and her frequent absence. According to him, he suspected she was cheating on him with her boss. He even admitted to installing special software on her computer so he could read her messages, though he found nothing to confirm his suspicions. All of this made police more convinced of Stephen's possible role in Tara's disappearance, though they still had no concrete proof. After several weeks with no sign of her, they began to suspect Tara might no longer be alive and started large-scale searches for her remains. They enlisted volunteers and scoured areas within several miles of her home, along with a large nearby park. The search continued for days but yielded no results. This went on until February 28th, when a local resident called the police. The woman had gone to the same park for a walk. She knew about Tara's disappearance and the search for her body, so she stayed alert and looked for anything out of place. Soon, she noticed something unusual. Beneath a tree along the path, there was a plastic bag hidden with branches and snow. It appeared to be filled with something, so the woman looked closer. Through the bag, she could see rubber gloves, something that looked like metal shavings, and a dark red substance at the bottom. She decided to take the bag and handed it over to police. Detectives instantly suspected the red at the bottom was blood and sent the bag to the lab. But there was a complication. Experts warned that DNA results could take up to 2 months because of heavy caseloads. Still, they examined the bag's contents and confirmed it indeed looked like human blood. The police quickly redirected their search to the area where the bag had been discovered, deploying all their available units. Stephen did not participate in this search, claiming the police were biased against him. Instead, he gave a long interview to a news station, where he made several questionable remarks. He repeatedly criticized Tara for being gone so often, calling her a bad mother. Stephen claimed he had taken on nearly all parental responsibilities and that he was a better mom than she ever was. When reporters questioned him about their finances and whether he was living off Tara's earnings, Stephen became defensive and insisted he didn't need a cent from her. During the same interview, he also accused Tara of infidelity but failed to provide any proof. Throughout the interview, Stephen continually disparaged Tara and emphasized how difficult their marriage had been. While Stephen was speaking on camera, detectives made progress. Earlier, they had attempted to get a search warrant for Tara's home but had been denied for lack of sufficient evidence, and Stephen had refused to allow them to search voluntarily. But after the blood-stained bag was found in the park, the judge approved a warrant. Police arrived at the house just as Stephen returned from the interview. Detectives told him about the warrant to search his property, and Stephen opened the door for them before calling his lawyer. The lawyer asked whether his client was being arrested, and police said no. Stephen then stated he was going to take his dog for a walk, retrieved it from inside, and left, while detectives began their search. They moved room by room until they reached the garage. There, one officer spotted a large green container with several plastic bags inside. Cutting one open, they found an unknown material along with what appeared to be women's clothing. Opening another bag, the detective realized with horror that it seemed to contain human remains. In all, there were 5 bags inside the container, and police quickly confirmed they held the remains of a woman. They now understood they had found Tara's body, and Stephen must have been responsible. But Stephen had not yet returned, so they immediately started looking for him. They worried he might try to escape or harm someone else, since he likely knew prison was in his future. At the same time, they reinforced the park search, since only part of Tara's body was recovered from the garage. More than 100 officers from neighboring areas were brought in, and soon their efforts paid off. Several hundred yards from where the first bag had been located, they found another part of her body, and later, her head. Because of the cold weather, the remains were well preserved, allowing detectives to confirm they belonged to Tara. More body parts were discovered, but as night fell, the search was paused until the next morning. During all this time, officers were also trying to track down Stephen, but with no luck. They contacted his friends, and one of them revealed Stephen had called to say police were searching his home and asked to be picked up. His friend drove to get him and noticed along the way that Stephen was acting very strangely. He looked terrified, his hands shook, and overall he appeared close to a breakdown. Once they reached the friend's house, Stephen said he wanted to see his children and asked to borrow the man's car. At the time, Stephen's children were staying in another state with his sister. The friend lent him his pickup truck, and Stephen left. Police obtained his phone and credit card records, which let them track his path. They saw Stephen had withdrawn money multiple times while heading toward the neighboring state, and had called his sister. That's when officers realized he was on his way to the children, so they rushed in that direction. Soon afterward, something unexpected happened. The nanny from Germany, with whom Stephen had been romantically involved, phoned the police from overseas. She said Stephen had just called her and confessed to killing Tara. According to him, they had argued that night, and he had started shouting at her. Tara slapped him in the face, and in a rage he pushed her, causing her to hit her head on the floor and die. Police no longer doubted his involvement, though they still had to capture him. For hours, they scoured the highway route into the next state, until eventually they found his friend's pickup abandoned near the entrance of a national park. Stephen himself was gone. Officers entered the park, and after several hours, using thermal cameras, they located him. He was lying under a tree, dressed only in light clothing, and they realized he was near death from hypothermia. He was in a delirious state, speaking to trees and mumbling incoherently. He was quickly airlifted to a hospital. Although his body temperature had fallen to just 88 degrees, doctors managed to save him, though it took time for him to recover fully. While still hospitalized, he was charged with murder, and detectives passed the case to the courts. It is worth noting that on the same day, his lawyer withdrew from defending him. When asked why, the lawyer simply said, "I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror each morning." Stephen was given a new lawyer, while forensic experts examined Tara's remains. One of the nation's most experienced pathologists, who had worked on the J.F. Kennedy and JonBenet Ramsey cases, was appointed as the lead examiner. After analyzing the remains, he concluded Stephen's account of events did not fit reality. Stephen had claimed Tara died from hitting her head, but the actual cause of death was strangulation. Once Stephen finally regained full consciousness, detectives visited him in the hospital, where he admitted to what really happened that night. According to him, when Tara arrived home and said she had to leave a day early, they argued and he began yelling at her. When she tried to leave the room, he grabbed her, and Tara struck him in the face. Enraged, Stephen retaliated, then strangled her. He dragged her body from the second floor to the garage and placed her in the trunk of her car. Around that same time, the nanny returned home, and Stephen told her his wife had just left him. The following morning, he drove the body to his father's shop, making sure no other employees were present. There, he destroyed all of Tara's documents and belongings, then dismembered her body using a saw. He even admitted that he vomited twice while doing this. But he kept reminding himself, if you don't do this, you will spend the rest of your life in prison. After several hours, he placed the remains into plastic bags, stored them in a container, and returned home, leaving them in the car. For the next few days, he thought about how to dispose of the body parts while at the same time building an alibi. He repeatedly called Tara and left voicemail messages, pleading for her to return home. At one point, he used his children's snow sled to transport the container to the park where the bags were eventually found. He placed the container on the sled and began pulling it up a hill to move it away from populated areas. At some point, the rope slipped from his grasp and the sled slid down the hill. The container overturned, spilling the bags with the remains. Stephen gathered them back into the container and resumed pulling it before burying the bags under snow in remote spots. Days later, when police started searching for Tara, detectives announced they would focus their efforts in the park. Stephen panicked. He remembered that one of the bags, the largest, had been poorly hidden, and he feared it would be quickly discovered. So, he went back to the park, retrieved several bags, carried them to his father's shop, and left them on the roof. The day before his televised interview, he moved the container from his house to the shop, collected the bags, and brought them back to his garage. To his dismay, the very next day police obtained a warrant for the home, where they found the bags inside the container. Afterward, Stephen admitted that once he realized his guilt was obvious, he had not intended to be taken alive. But in the end, he failed to go through with his plan and survived despite nearly freezing to death. Throughout his talks with police, Stephen showed no signs of remorse. Instead, he often smiled and joked, even as he described dismembering the body. While awaiting trial in jail, his children continued living with his sister. Tara's family, however, was unhappy about this. Stephen's sister stayed in touch with him, expressed sympathy, and even joked about Tara's murder. Eventually, Tara's relatives succeeded in transferring custody of the children to Tara's sister, though Stephen's side of the family still retained visitation rights. The trial began in November 2007, and Stephen did not contest his guilt. Nonetheless, his new lawyer attempted to argue for leniency, claiming Stephen committed the crime after years of marital strain caused by his wife's frequent absences. During the proceedings, it also emerged that Stephen had lied about Tara's alleged plan to leave a day early. Her boss testified that Tara had no extra meetings scheduled and was expected to begin work as usual. Tara's sister, who had spoken to her shortly before the murder, also confirmed this. Tara told her she would be at home all weekend, as usual. Furthermore, there was no evidence to support Stephen's accusation that Tara was unfaithful. Her boss stated their relationship was entirely professional, which was backed by emails and text messages. Even Stephen himself admitted he did not truly believe she was cheating. Prosecutors could not prove Stephen had planned the killing in advance. It appeared he committed it in a fit of rage, which meant he could have been convicted of second-degree instead of first-degree murder. On December 21, 2007, however, the jury unanimously found him guilty, and he was sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison. His lawyer tried to appeal the ruling, but without success. Since then, Stephen has been serving his sentence behind bars, though his story did not end there. Tara's murder attracted the attention of millions nationwide, and Stephen seemed to revel in it. From prison, he started writing a book and planned to publish it with help from his sister. They even talked about the possibility of a film adaptation, with Stephen speculating about which actor might portray him. In 2008, new information came to light. Stephen's children told their aunt they had actually witnessed their father killing their mother. That night, after hearing screams, they had left their room and seen everything. When this became public, Stephen's relatives accused the children of lying and continued to defend him. Later that same year, it also emerged that Stephen's father, unlike the rest of his family, he did not support him, was unable to live with what his son had done. His body was discovered in his home. Today, Stephen remains in prison, not eligible for parole until 2058. Each year, Tara's relatives and friends organize a marathon along the path in the park where she often jogged, with her children always taking part. Despite what their father did, they have found the strength to move on and to keep their mother's memory alive. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned and brace yourself for what's coming next.